Hey, what's up, you guys? So today I want to talk about using Lofi as a enhancement tool for snares. This is a session that I had recorded a long time ago, years ago, really. And for some reason, I didn't use a snare bottom mic. In fact, I used two different snare top mics. So because there's no snare bottom mic, there's no real top end and no snare sound. The snares ended up sounding kind of like really attacky with no real sustain. So we're gonna take a listen here. Let me just solo these out, and we'll mute the process tracks, and these are duplicates of the original tracks. So this is what the snares originally sounded like together. So there's nothing really wrong with them. It's not that they don't sound good, it's just they don't sound full. There's not enough top end. So what I did was I used Lofi. It's a free Pro Tools stock plugin on both of these, and what I did here is I basically just tweaked settings up, and I kind of wanted to do like a faux bottom snare kind of esque sound. So the main features of Lo-Fi that I like to use is this grunge section here in the bottom. Here you have distortion, noise, and saturation. This other stuff up top is just a sample rate. It'll really kind of like, you can really mess with it, and a sample size. So you could do make it 2 bits if you want. You can bring the sample rate down. The anti-aliasing, and you can do adaptive or linear quantization. I really don't mess with those things very often, to be honest. I really just mess with the distortion, noise, and saturation. So if you want to take a listen to what that actually can do, let's just mute these again, right? And we'll listen to this one snare, and we'll just copy this over. And we'll start this up at scratch, and I'll show you exactly what these 3 sections do. All right, so we're just going to listen to the snare real quick. Cool. That's pretty basic, It's basically just distortions kind of doing a lot of compression and just overall distortion and hyping up the top end. Noise as this like white noise, and saturation kind of makes everything really lo-fi. And the more you lower the sample rate, well, because exactly what would happen with lowering the sample rate is it just kind of cuts off frequencies. The sample size just becomes a bit crusher. Anti-aliasing kind of just does some weird, I guess it's basically just quantizing it, and it's adding quantization errors when you go down. So let's listen. Let's take a look at this first snare right here. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna unsolo these two. We'll listen to the first top snare. So this is it by itself. And now we're gonna do the top snare 1 with after processing. Cool. So it's a pretty big difference. So let's take a look at what I did first of all. All right. So first thing we did is we did distortion 4, and as we could hear from earlier, distortion adds a lot of top end and noise to add some of that like white noise-ish, making it sound almost like there's a faux bottom snare. Seems like it'll add the little white noise like a little less or only on some of the peakier hits. So I like to keep it around there. And then saturation, as you can hear, kind of really destroys and lo-fi's the sound. So I added just a little bit because 0.1, and it was audible. It was enough to kind of take out some of the edge. After that, I went to the Digi Stock EQ, and I just found frequencies that I wanted to take out. I believe there was like a ringing that I didn't really like. So let's take a listen to, and I'll bring things in one by one. So yeah, a pretty big transformation. I noticed that lo-fi, when you add drive, the distortion, when you drive the distortion, I noticed on lo-fi it kind of gives it some compression. It kind of gives the feel that the sustain of the original audio has really been brought back. You know, it feels like it's really sustaining. I really like it. I think it's really cool. I find that adding it kind of helps give the snare more of a longer transient tail. So now we're going to listen to the second top snare. This is the original, the one that's not muted, and then I'll bring in the one that's with the processing. So this one's going to have the biggest change, the second top snare. It's been kind of overcooked a little, and I kind of wanted it to be like more of a featured, just big change sound, kind of like over compressed with the drive, you know, with the distortion and stuff. So let's take a listen to the original. So we'll go over the processing that I did on this one. So we started off here with a lo-fi, distortion at 5.3, noise at 5%, and saturation at 0.1. So you'll hear from this one that the distortion really just crushed it, kind of destroyed it, and then the noise is going to be adding a lot of that hissiness. So we'll put these down, we'll just leave the distortion, and I'll bring it in. So what I want you to listen to when I'm bringing the noise back to 5% is listen to the very top end. Kind of sounds like a little bit like the actual snare, bottom part of the snare. Just listen to it really carefully. So as you can hear from that, I use noise to kind of emulate a little bit of that snare, only when it's really hitting it harder. Then I use the saturation to do the very smallest amount of taming of the top end. So now we're going to move on to the EQ. So here's the EQ. Here's the settings that I used. What I did was I just kind of found things that I didn't like of it. I kind of wanted to just enhance the top end. I took out a lot of the body because I found I just didn't really like it very much. All that compression and distortion kind of was like making it sound a little bit congested. Then I just enhanced it like a wider boost while cutting a little bit. So let's take a listen without it and with it. So pretty simple, pretty easy. We're going to do a quick little A-B of before and after of everything. Solo these out. Oh, that was a kick. Don't want to solo the kick out. Here's going to be the original snare first, right here, these two, and then the new snare. In fact, for some reason, since this is an old session, I never actually, I just kind of opened it up and started listening. Let's color this real quick. Drums. Guitars are usually green. And vocals are pink, bass is blue. All right, so let's just listen to the snare top, both of them originally, and then I'll mute those and you'll hear the new ones. What you should be able to hear from that is that it still has that really nice attack, but I've really lengthened out the decay. I made it sound longer, and it sounds a little bit like, just in general, sounds a little more exciting with that top end. So now let's take a listen to it. So what we'll do is we'll just mute the processed ones, have the original, and then I'll mute the originals and bring in the processed ones. Ready? Here we go. So what you should have been able to hear from that is the snare with the lo-fi and the EQ kind of just sat better. It had more of a nice attack to it. It had a really nice just the top end just had a nice sound to it. It sounded a lot more right. I like the sustain it had. It felt a lot more like what a snare should have had. These two, the original tracks, were good sounding top snares. You know, I don't remember if maybe I think on the board one of the channels was busted and we ended up having to not use it. So yeah, that kind of wraps it all up. You know, we're just using saturation as a way of enhancing. I mean, you can use it as in many ways. Like I like to use certain saturation plugins as de-essers, like the SDRR. You can do some for top end enhancement, and you can even do some for complete destruction. I mean, there's lots of free ones out there. There's Klanghelm's IVGI. There's Camel Audio's Camel Crusher. There's if you have Pro Tools or Studio One Pro, there's Softtube Saturation Knob. There's lots more. I'm sure there's tons more. But yeah, I would just say try experimenting. They're really great for enhancing. I really like using them on drums, especially. Even on the kick, I like to use it. So yeah, that kind of wraps it all up. Let me know what you guys think. Hope this helped. See ya.